Hello. Now that I've talked about the four primary emotional responses, I want to talk about how they work, whether in the foreground or the background. The key thing is we're always feeling something, even if we don't know it, even if we can't tell at the time that we're feeling something. It's always there, we're always feeling. And it's just like I've said before, emotional responses are like sensory responses. They are actually the same thing, or they have the same function. They work in the same way in our brain and our body. So just like we're always tasting, we don't know most of the time that we're tasting. We're not aware of anything that we're tasting. Like right now, I'm tasting, but I'm not tasting anything. But if I were to suddenly eat a sour pickle, well, I would taste that. It would be strong enough of a taste response that I'd say, ooh, that's really sour. Or anything, any kind of food, anything I put in my mouth that caused a big response, then I would notice it. The same is true for smelling. Like if I'm smelling right now, so are you. I don't smell anything noticeable right now, but if someone brought in a bunch of roses or some kind of fragrant flower, well, I would notice that smell. Again, just like emotional, we feel the joy of a close relationship. And when we're with that person, when things are really going well with that person, we feel the joy of it. But if we were to lose that person, that close relationship, temporarily might feel some loneliness or sadness that they're away, or certainly if we lost them because they broke up with us or they died. And that would be a lot of sadness that we would be feeling. But otherwise, we go through life, just like we're tasting and smelling and seeing, we don't really notice. We go through life feeling. We go through life feeling emotionally all the time. And we know most of the time don't even notice anything going on because there isn't much going on. And it's like, just like the taste and the touch and the smell systems in our brain and body, the emotional system is there. It's just always on. So like if we had to like turn on the emotional system or turn on the smell system, we would miss things all the time. We wouldn't respond quickly enough to deal with the situation. So things are just always on, ready to really tell us something like, oh, that tastes great, oh, that smells bad, oh, that feels wonderful, in terms of a joy response. One thing also that's really cool is that we can sort of make this comparison between the four primary emotional responses and the four primary taste responses. It kind of gives us an idea of that and what's going on. So our four primary emotional responses, as I have said and outlined in previous episodes, are joy, anger, fear, and sadness. The five primary taste responses are sweet, salty, savory, sour, and bitter. So all the tastes that we can experience, that we notice going on in our lifetimes, fall into those categories. Just like all the emotions, the feelings that we emotionally experience fall into the four categories of joy, anger, fear, and sadness. And again, because that system is always on, it's like, yeah, there's a sadness response, or whoa, there's a joy response. We can know what to expect, we can monitor if we need to, or just go along for the ride depending on what's best for us. So yeah, we feel joy when something great happens to us. We feel fear, have a fear response when we get into trouble of some kind, and we have an anger response when someone offends us. Similarly, we taste the sweetness of a chocolate bar, the saltiness of a French fry, or the savoriness of a thick, juicy steak, if you like all that kind of food. But anyway, those are our taste responses that we have in response to certain tastes, just like we have emotional responses in response to different things in life that occur. But most of the time, we just don't notice that we're having an emotional response. We just don't notice that we're having a taste response or a smell response. It's just There's not much there, there's not much to notice, it's in the background, going on all the time, and there's nothing really to deal with. However, it's the guts of like this episode and of understanding our emotional system is to know our primary emotions are always on. And so when we suddenly feel something like fear, is not to be afraid of it, not to think that it's bad, not to avoid the feeling, just, oh, I'm afraid of something, I'm having a fear response, what do I need to do now? Taste responses are there to tell us something, smell responses, same thing. Like if you smell a lot of garbage, you want to get rid of it or you want to avoid it, it's not good for you. And if there's something going on that is causing a fear response, you want to try to change things. You may want to run like hell if it's a bear in the woods, or you just may want to, oh, I've got to make more money because I can't pay my bills. I have a fear response, pretty persistent, that I can't pay my bills, so it tells me something, I need to somehow make more money. So that's a big, broader, but important subject in modern life. But again, emotional responses are always going on, just like taste and other sensory responses. It's when they rise to a certain point that we notice it, and then we may need to deal with it. And we just don't need to fear or dread or feel even sadness about our emotional responses. They're there for a reason. There's nothing wrong with us. There's nothing bad going on if we're having really challenging emotions like sadness. It's like we're having that emotional response because we're supposed to. And then we work with it. All of this helps us discover something really important in cognitive behavioral treatment and mental health that I do, which is we are not our emotions. They are something that we have. It's a hugely important part of psychotherapy when people are feeling really badly, like in anxiety, depression, is to help them with that knowledge, is that we are not our emotions. They are something that we're having. So when we compare them to sensory responses, then that really helps with the understanding, like, oh yeah, when something like X, Y, or Z happens, I have that kind of emotional response. I'm supposed to. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm gonna work with it. I'm gonna either keep it going because this wonderful human in my life causes a big joy response, or I'm going to change it because I'm constantly afraid I can't pay my bills. I've got to add another job if I can. Stuff like that. Lots of stuff like that. We also need to manage our emotions when we're with other people, and I'll talk more about that later. Like, let's say I'm really happy about something, but I'm with someone who's really sad. I'm going to manage my joy response. I'm going to manage my happiness because I want to be with them and talk to them and allow them to share and express what they got to do, which is, for them at that moment, is a big sadness response because something happened, like a partner broke up with them or something, right? So I also, a lot of times, like you, we have to manage our fear response in the face of adversity, like something is going on. And we really just can't show how afraid we are. We just have to keep going. And we know we're having a fear response, but we just have to keep going like we're not having. That happens all the time. The last example is something happens that really makes us angry, big anger response. But we have to remain calm in the situation for whatever reason. And so we manage that anger response. And then maybe hopefully later on we can actually talk to a person or the person or whatever, or just even just go somewhere to cool off, allow the anger response to dissipate, to go away. To conclude, the last thing here is that to know our emotional response system is always happening, it's always going on, just like the sensory response systems like smelling and tasting and touching and seeing. Always going on. Don't notice it most of the time, but when we do, we can say, whoa, there's some kind of emotional response, and what do I do with it? And don't be surprised by emotional responses like fear, which we can turn into anxiety. Lots of discussion, I'll talk more about that later, but then we fear that response, which we call panic attacks or panic disorder, so we can change that completely, get rid of that completely by understanding the fear response is a normal, natural fear response. Okay, what do I do with it kind of idea. So that's the main thrust of this particular episode. We are always feeling something, And that's exactly right for us. It's healthy, normal, emotional responding. Whether it's low, we don't notice it, medium, yeah, we do, not a big deal, or high, it's pretty intense, and we either have to manage that or do something about it. Okay, more on all these issues, a lot more as episodes continue, and have a great day.